Now, every year there are around 10 million overseas trips from Australia, with the US among the top destinations. But horror stories are emerging of treatment at the border, with one story so shocking it's got many asking if America's still safe.
Since Donald Trump took office, immigration has been at the top of his agenda.
We are seeing the Trump administration take aggressive steps to oversee the largest mass deportation effort in U.S. history.
We're going to pay each one a certain amount of money, and we're going to get them a beautiful flight back to where they came from.
Trump's crackdown on illegal immigrants within the country also extending to tourists trying to enter.
A backpacking trip turned nightmare.
Visitors with valid travel documents being detained at border crossings.
Next thing you know, I'm taken, and for 2 weeks haven't been told anything.
Nobody is safe there anymore to come to America as a tourist.
They're trying to deport as many people as possible, but they're also trying to refuse entry to as many people as possible. This treatment of visitors is much more aggressive than I've ever seen in my career.
Among the Aussies detained at the border, a man stripped of his valid US work visa and sent home despite not having lived here for 10 years. And the head coach of our MMA team sent to prison before being forced back to Australia.
What we're witnessing is far more dangerous and deeply alarming than simply an immigration crackdown. Trump's deportation dragnet has been incoherent and all-consuming.
And despite Trump denying tourists are being targeted,
We treat our tourists great. We're the tourism capital of the world.
people are clearly spooked. Total overseas arrivals into the US dropping almost 12% in March, with Aussie visitor numbers down 7% year on year, the largest decline since COVID.
We're seeing a huge drop in the number of people that are trying to relocate to the US for work, for example, or students. If you are going to the United States and you have a lot of anxiety about traveling already, it might be good to go somewhere else at the moment.
Last week, Australian Nicolle Saroukos was trying to enter Hawaii to visit her US husband when she was thrown into federal prison, strip-searched and refused food before being sent home.
My mum kept reassuring me the whole time that nothing was going to happen to me and that everything was going to be okay.
She's now banned from ever returning.
The experience was extremely traumatic. I think throughout the whole ordeal, I was running off nothing but adrenaline and my fight or flight, but it wasn't until I landed back in Sydney that everything settled in for me and it really started to register what I actually had endured.
And Nicole's here now to tell us exactly what she did endure. Nicolle, can you take us through how you ended up being detained?
Upon my arrival in Honolulu Airport, I was questioned by one of the officers, and then shortly after, my mother and I were taken into a room. We were held there for quite some time before my mum was released, and then I was unfortunately remaining behind for further interrogation, and then that was about a 4 to 5 hour ordeal before I was taken to the federal detention centre.
Were you scared?
I would say I was terrified at the time. I didn't really know what my fate was going to be, nor did I know where they were taking me, whether I was safe. I didn't know my environment or even my rights. Nothing was read to me, unfortunately. So I had to come to my own ruling of their decision, which was based off the questions they asked me, being the amount of luggage that I had, and based off the fact that I was married to a US citizen, I'm assuming that they thought that I was going to overstay my visa.
What were they asking you before you ended up being detained?
They were just asking me very intrusive questions, like the jobs that I was exposed to whilst being a New South Wales police officer. They asked me if I had any relations to any organised crimes or gangs. They asked me about my tattoos. They insinuated that I had intel that I was taking into the country and asking me about, importation, exportation of certain drugs. So I'm assuming that that was what they were ruling their decision off.
So you end up in a federal prison. What happened once you were there?
Prior to the prison, I had a cavity search conducted on my body, and then I was put in handcuffs. I asked them if I was under arrest. They said no, and then I was taken to the facility where I was to undergo another cavity search and a strip search. I was placed in prison wear, what they put the prisoners in. I was fingerprinted all the normal inmate processing, and then I ended up in a cell overnight until I was released the next morning.
So scary. And your husband's in the US military, so I imagine you've been to the US many times and nothing like this has ever happened before?
No, I previously obviously have visited and I never had any issues. It was pretty much a breeze the entire time. The most I think I've ever taken in customs is about 4 minutes of interrogation. This time round was a first for me. I've never experienced treatment like that in my life.
So you mentioned there were some questions about the luggage and so on, but do you have any idea what it was that tripped the wire that made them say, this is the person we're going for?
I don't know what exactly set them off. As I said, I'm just assuming at this point of what I brought, the amount of luggage I had, like my clothes, for example. They kept making comments on the amount of clothes that I had for 3.5 weeks. I had another suitcase with, my husband has a dog back in Hawaii, so I bought her a new lead and a harness, had some dog toys in there and a couple candles for his apartment. So they leaned towards the fact that I had this amount of clothes and this other stuff in my other luggage, and they kept insinuating that I was going to overstay my visa, to which then I told them, you are prematurely making an opinion based off purely what I've brought.
Well, so what are you going to do now? You're banned from going back, your husband's in the military. What are your options now?
Well, from my understanding, I have a 10-year ban as a visitor to the United States. They told me that I can go for the green card. That was never something that I wanted to do. They even told me that if I do apply for that, there may be a high chance that I'll get declined and I will be susceptible to that treatment every single time I enter the United States. My husband and I are currently just dealing with what has happened just day by day. We don't have a plan. We don't know what the next step is. Unfortunately, it's just a very stressful situation to be in.
Nicolle, what an ordeal and what a situation you now find yourself in with your husband on the other side of the world. And I mean, God knows how often you'll be able to see him and where. And I mean, it's a horrible situation. All the best with it from here. And thanks so much for speaking to us.
Thank you, guys.